All right, everyone, and welcome back to our Working Group 3 status. David Meyer is here he helms our Working Group 3 and all our guideline development, and he'll walk everyone through what Working Group 3 is all about and up to. But first, for those of you who don't know David, he's a senior manager at Comsearch. He's a board member. He's a past president of NSMA. Comsearch is a preeminent global provider of wireless spectrum management and engineering products and services. And he and his team have developed industry standard interference analysis and mitigation processes and procedures. And they maintain state-of-the-art software and comprehensive databases used in the design of complex wireless systems. Welcome, David, and take it away.
All right, now hopefully you can see my presentation. I believe it shared correctly.
I'll give you a confirmation once we see it. So,
okay. Well, you should be. So let me try sharing again.
Okay, it says you've started screen sharing. There we go.
Okay.
You're in the house.
Right.
All right.
Thank you, Joe, very much. I wanted to add just a little bit to that. I've been participating in NSMA since the late 80s, so it has been a considerable amount of time. And I can say that we've gone through a lot of, I guess, gyrations would probably be the most applicable term for NSMA. I know at one point we were having quarterly conferences and working group focused conferences all over the United States. So, at one point we were much bigger than we currently are. And the board has been very focused on going back to a growth mode and expanding the reach, if you will, and looking at getting a lot more people, a lot more industries, government people involved. And hopefully we're going to be able to accomplish that over the next several years. So I'm currently on the board as a vice president, and work closely with Joe. And before I get started, I do want to commend Joe on all the work that he and his team at Thought Delivery Systems did for the conference. Seems like with everything else, we're always in a state of flux with COVID and everything still going on. But we very much hope that next year's conference will be in person. So, we're looking forward to that. So the focus of what I'm going to be talking about is the Working Group 3 activities. I'm the chairman of Working Group 3, and we do a lot of different things, but I'm going to try and concisely state that. And hopefully, even though we started a couple minutes late, I may be able to get us out a little bit early. So, okay. So Working Group 3, I'm going to look at primarily 5 things. The purpose of the working group, the participation and the stakeholders involved, our meetings, the recommendation and issues we're currently focused on, and what we look to be working on for the next 12 months. So the purpose of Working Group 3 is we want to provide an industry forum for spectrum discussion. And that discussion can be driven by, any number of parties, either, licensees, vendors, government, participants who might have, a spectrum issue they want to talk about. What we try and do is reach and develop industry consensus on spectrum issues. We want to drive that into specific coordination procedures. We want to create and maintain recommendations to help guide the industry. Anybody new coming in, we want to give them a framework so that they can step into the spectrum space, if you will, running for what they need to do. We want to help interpret FCC rules, provide feedback on NSMA regulatory filings to the board and through the group participants as well. And we also are set up to refer items to the board that may be beyond the scope of Working Group 3 to either see if there's additional board action to take, or if there is an inactive working group that needs to become active again in certain areas to deal with the issue. And I going backwards here. We don't want to do that. I've written out a very simplified coordination process, and essentially in the point-to-point licensed bands and in the Earth Station bands, there's the coordination process is laid out by the FCC, and this is pretty much all the guidance they give. They do provide a little bit more, but essentially they say you notify all the parties. Parties have 30 days to respond, and you resolve the interference concerns. It sounds very simple, but that simplicity really doesn't convey everything that's involved with coordination. And that has kind of led to I think in excess or close to 60 different NSMA recommendations on how coordinators and licensees need to deal with everything to get to resolving the interference concerns. The coordination area, essentially, who do you send a coordination notice to? We've gone back and forth over the years and have pretty much arrived at a set of parameters that we think takes into account all of the parties that would potentially be impacted. So if you are coordinating, let's say, for instance, a 6 gigahertz path, in either the upper or lower 6 gigahertz band, you would fall in this category here, which is below 15 gigahertz. And essentially, you have a radius where you would notify everybody in that radius from each transmitter, and you have a keyhole distance. So if this is the coordinated path right here, then you would have a 125-mile distance around each transmitter and an additional keyhole distance of plus or minus 5 degrees from the main beam of the antennas that you would also include the parties. So any path that has an endpoint inside of this entire area, this red path here is an indication, would be sent a coordination notice. Now, that's not to say that you have interference issues with everybody in that area, simply that potentially you could impact them and you would need to notify them based on FCC rule. The path set out here does not fall within that distance or within that area and would not get a copy. Now, that doesn't take into account any engineering that you're doing to avoid, either through frequency selection, antennas, or radios, to avoid issues. This is simply the notification. So why? Why do you need to do this? Why do we need a working group 3? Well, if you look at the licensed operations covered by Part 101, the vast majority of the users are co-primary terrestrial point-to-point and earth stations on specific frequencies and specific sites. So if you look at the broad range of companies and licensees involved, and I've really just listed a brief group here, everything from broadcast TV and radio, churches, cable operators, you jump down to hospitals, railroads, universities, water utilities, gas utilities, railroads, police, fire, emergency, you name it. Almost every industry or spectrum user out there is going to want to use this band. So you have a lot of different people, different companies involved, and they're all coming from a different level of expertise. Some of them may have very expanded knowledge on the spectrum, how to use it, how to interact with the FCC rules, but many of them are simply looking for a quick communications link, and they don't have that expertise. So typically they're going to go to a consultant, or they're going to ask somebody else to do this for them. But still, the NSMA website and Working Group 3 provides or fills in all the coordination holes for them to build from the FCC rules and know what they need to do and how to approach it. I like this picture because it gives you in a snapshot a concept of the congestion in the point-to-point microwave bands. This is a shot of Los Angeles, the 6, 11, 18, and 23 gigahertz frequency paths. I know George had mentioned, and I believe Mark did as well, that when they were looking at the 6 gigahertz band, there were well over 100,000 licensed frequencies. This is focused on a much broader stroke, it's simply looking at the paths involved in these 4 bands. But it gives you the idea of how many shareable frequency links are involved in a specific area. So I took this a step further, and I wanted to take a high level view, and I picked, okay, let's look at the 4 largest cities by population in the United States. And for each of those cities, I took a 75-mile high level view and pulled in the number of 6 gigahertz, 11 gigahertz, 18 gigahertz, and 23 gigahertz paths in each of those areas. And again, the only point here is the system works. Prior coordination in the point-to-point license band works. It has for years, and we continue to refine the ability of what we're looking at with the different radios, the different types of antennas, the different types of modulations, the use of ATPC, the use of ACM, and on how we can best continue to share the spectrum. So if you look at Los Angeles, it's number 2 in population, approximately 4 million people. There are 7,800 paths within 75 miles in these 4 bands of the city center. And all of them were coordinated using the Part 101 rules, and they've effectively been able to operate independent of each other, effective, again, without or with minimal interference issues. New York, the number 1 in population, 8.8 million, has almost 4,500 paths in those same 4 bands. Now, again, I just want to caveat this. I didn't do a data purge. I simply looked at the data in the Comsearch database to give some figures you could start to get a feel for it. Chicago's number 3 in population at 2.7 million people. They have over 4,000 microwave paths in these same 4 bands. And finally, Houston, who's number 4 in population, 2.3 million people, had over 1,800 paths. Just kind of an interesting note, I looked at Dallas simply because when I think of Texas, I always think of Dallas as being a bigger city, but when I broke down the population numbers, their actual path count came in considerably higher than Houston. But again, these are not, to draw any concrete conclusions, but just to give you a concept of, in these metropolitan areas, how many paths have been successfully coordinated. And a lot of them were done based on the recommendations on what's set up in Working Group 3. So what we've set up for the recommendations have come up with an effective and very efficient way for microwave users to put in license links and to share them with other users. So who are the participation or the stakeholders in Working Group 3? Again, we provide an open industry forum, so we pull from all different areas. We look at the issues impacting the spectrum industry, whether it's specifically brought up by a member, whether it's somebody else just coming in, hey, can you guys talk about this? Issues can be discussed. We can move them to a different working group if needed. And the current active members include coordinators, spectrum managers, manufacturers, service providers, vendors, broadcasters, consultants, licensees, academics, government, and even retirees who just can't let go of the industry, representing decades of experience and knowledge. So we have a huge knowledge and experience base to draw from, and it gives us a very good insight in how to tackle spectrum issues and specifically spectrum sharing. So our meetings are typically monthly, usually on the 3rd or 4th Tuesday of the month, and it's really dependent on the issues or the edit progress. The last several months, we haven't had a meeting, partly driven by my work schedule, but partly driven by trying to make progress on the one recommendation I've been working on. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 28th. Agendas are provided with the meeting focus and documents under review ahead of time. And editors are typically assigned to recommendations that are in progress. So we have somebody that's actively working on them as we go through the discussion and the update process to make sure we're efficient in getting recommendations done. And then we also hold open discussions on any new or pertinent spectrum issues that are brought to the group for the group discuss. So currently our recommendation and issue focus, currently we've reviewed, updated, replaced, or archived just over 50% of the entire NSMA recommendation list. So we're going to continue that process. We're currently working on working group 5.92.008, which is a tutorial for C2I objectives. And that'll be our main thing we're discussing in June. But in addition to that, we've got a couple of issues or a few issues that have come up. We want to talk about temporary Earth station coordination issues. These are primarily ones at 6 gigahertz. The experimental SDA coordination requirements. Anytime a licensee applies and receives an experimental license to go up temporarily, sometimes even for a year or even 2 years, the FCC usually tacks on coordination requirements depending on the bands they're operating on. And then we also have a set of TIA standard 10 updates that is just now completing an update process for that standard that have to do with short-term objectives and a methodology for doing radio TDI calculation without manufacturer information. So that's going to be kind of what we're looking at in June. So what are we going to do over the next year after June? So the next working group 3 coordination recommendation that's on the going to be reviewed and looked at is the coordination procedures for ATPC. We then have a handful of remaining coordination process recommendations. And after that, we're going to move on to the other recommendations, which are right now were generated by different working groups. But we want to look at each of those and evaluate them and say, okay, is the recommendation still valid? Has it obsolete? Or is it something that needs to be worked on? And if those come up and we don't have the capabilities or the the basis within the working group 3 to do that review and to do that rewrite if needed, then we'll go back to the board and say, okay, we need to reactivate this. So the next ones, and we're going to work through these in order. We're going to look at working group 1, which had to do with electronic PCNs. Working group 2, which was focused on terrain loss. Working group 4, which was the RF test methods. Working group 5, which were interference objectives. And then after that, and they're listed here, we're going to just work down the line. And hopefully, within the next 1 to 2 years, we'll be able to work through the rest of the recommendations and have either updated, recommendations throughout for everything on the NSMA website. Now, these are all posted. So if you want to see where we're going, where we've been, look on the NSMA website, www.nsma.org, and you'll see recommendations at the top. Click on that and you can see a list of all these, see all the recommendations. Feel free to download. We want people to look at them and certainly comment if it's something we need to update as we go through. So with that, I want to open this for any questions. If anybody had anything they needed to discuss. So Joe, do we have anything we need to talk about?
I don't see any questions posted here on the Q&A and chat. I just think
All
high
right.
level wanted to thank you. Oh, here we got something here from, there's the recommendations are just being posted to the group. So people.
Oh, okay. Great.
Appreciate, it's a pleasure to hear this and see this. I know we've got plenty of work ahead, as you mentioned, crisply stated. Appreciate that. I know we have a board quick check-in at 4. I think that's on a separate a channel, so to speak. So that email will go out. But other than that, thank you and CommScope for your time today and sharing this.
Well, one thing I did want to say, Joe, if anybody wants to join Working Group 3, they can send me an email and I'll make sure they get on the distribution of the agenda, and have the call details and everything, because we certainly want to make it open to anybody that'd like to participate.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And, maybe, in fact, maybe for future conferences, we put that into, because there's so many different folks who participated in the last 2 days. Just Dr. Girth, who just participated, for example, he would like to get his message out more. And I'm sure there's some guidelines for meteorological use that could come into play. For example, that's probably one of many examples that popped up in the last 2 days. So fair enough.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, David. We look forward to seeing you and everyone's happy face at 4. I'll send that note out shortly, actually within a minute. That'll be a separate link than what we've been using for the conference.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess Mariana and Theo, thank you for your support. I don't know, Mariana, if you'll run the videos one more time for anyone who hasn't seen them, that would be awesome if you're out there. And for those who want to see that between now and 4, feel free to stay around. Otherwise, this concludes our 37th annual National Spectrum Managers Association conference. We look forward to seeing you this time next year. And as David mentioned, if we continue to grow, you might see conferences on the half year or on the quarter as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. The National Spectrum Management Association, or NSMA, is a voluntary international association of microwave, radio, wireless, and satellite frequency coordinators, licensees, operators, manufacturers, and regulators. Established in 1984 at the request of the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, the association provides a forum to develop industry guidelines for efficient use and management of the frequency spectrum by the wireless telecommunications community. NSMA provides a linkage between government regulations and industry practice by developing recommendations that streamline and standardize procedures used by the frequency coordination community. We strive to provide an open forum for stakeholders to mold responsible spectrum industry practice and resolve conflicts. If you know someone who should be a member, reach out and invite them to join. You can find us on our website, nsma.org, www.nsma.org, or find us on LinkedIn or Facebook. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is your NSMA President, Joe Sandry. I'd like to welcome everyone to our 37th annual conference. Although we're still meeting virtual, we continue to remain connected throughout our world of technology, and we're excited to present to you over the next 2 days this series of industry-leading talks and panels. Stay tuned to see the schedule. Enjoy the conference.
Hello, and welcome to the National Spectrum Management Association home webpage, where we provide leadership and guidance on today's critical spectrum management issues. Check in on nsma.org from time to time to see the latest developments and events. We have kept our conferences over the years carefully recorded in PDFs, and other archive materials can be found here at the bottom right-hand corner where you've previously seen other conference presentations. We would highly encourage you to look at them. There's a whole Trojan of materials on a variety of subjects. You can also learn more about our memberships here on our membership page at NSMA. You can become a member or renew your membership. On our sponsor page, you can learn more about sponsorship opportunities with the NSMA. We'd love to have you as a sponsor, so think about it. Here at the NSMA, we are always open on our webpage, so come visit us at www.nsma.org. If you have any questions, email us at info@nsma.org. Thank you.